Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Coffee with Friends, where we may discuss trauma of all sorts to include all types of abuse. Viewers and listeners may find it unsettling and triggering. The guests on our live streams reflect a diverse set of values, morals, and ethics that may not reflect the morals, values, and ethics of the Misfit Amish. But as a reminder, if this live stream causes you distress, please seek support from your trusted folks and qualified mental health professionals as needed. You may also cease listening until you're able to listen again. Today, we will be discussing the Bann and Meidung as it relates to our various Amish experiences. And I'd like to welcome Linda, Naomi, Katherine, and Ruth. And if you'd like to go around and introduce yourself, Linda. Oh, well, that was quick. I don't know what happened. But I guess, Naomi, you can start.
Sure.
Just tell us who you are, what type of Amish you were, how long you've been out, and were you formally shunned by the church?
Okay. So I was raised an Amish Mennonite, BT Amish, minister's daughter in central Pennsylvania, and then moved to Western Oklahoma with my family in the mid-90s. And then I left the tradition when I was 21. So I was not shunned. But when another person, when a friend of mine in the church was leaving shortly after I was, it was pretty clear the ministers wished they could have put us in the bond, but they didn't, because that wasn't technically the way they did things.
Did they have a different words? Like, did they practice excommunication?
Excommunication is what they
Okay. So they called it excommunication.
Mm-hmm.
That's very interesting. So how many years ago was that?
It was in the late 90s.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
How about you, Ruth?
So I grew up Amish. I was Amish until I was 16-ish, and then my family joined the Mennonites, and then I left the Mennonites about 3 years ago. My first experience was not actually for us, but like when my friends, and I was probably 8 or 9, when my friends' parents chose to leave, they got excommunicated. So like I was cut off from my friends. So that was my first experience. And then when my family left the Amish to join the Mennonites, my parents were excommunicated. So I was never formally excommunicated, but because my parents were, then they practiced the Meidung for our whole family. So that was when I lost most of the contact with like my aunts and uncles, the cousins that I grew up, my grandparents. So really kind of lost all extended family through that.
Thank you, Ruth. That sounds like it was a lot to deal with.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you were here. What about you, Linda?
Yeah, I was born and raised Amish, and my first time that I witnessed Bann and Meidung was within the family, an uncle being excommunicated. That's the first memory that I have of somebody actually witnessing the Bann and Meidung. And then the next one that was really very hard for me was a close friend of mine was excommunicated. Her and her whole family were excommunicated. So that's when I was forced to practice Bann and Meidung towards somebody that I did really deeply cared about. And then in 2008, I decided to leave the Amish church, and then I experienced it personally myself.
Wow. That's a lot. Thank you so much for being here and being willing to talk about it. Hey, Katherine, what about you?
I was born and raised Amish in Ohio. I left the Amish 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And yes, I am shunned. And I laugh about it too.
I mean,
It's funny to
mean-
me how they do it because they do it in so many different ways. It's funny to me how they think they can get away with it. It doesn't affect me. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Well, with that being said, like, what is the Bann and Meidung? Because when you start talking about the Bann translates into English as ban. It means you're being banned. And Meidung translates to avoidance, the avoidance, which is why the Meidung is the actively practicing of the shunning. But it's also really interesting to me that, like, y'all would have called it, some of you like call it excommunication. And for us, like, we called it the Bann and Meidung.
Yeah. So for in my experience, that was dependent on the communities we were in. So for like the old order Amish communities that I was born into, because I was in 3 different old order Amish communities before my parents joined the new order. So in the Amish ones, the Amish communities that I was a part of, they called it the Bann and the Meidung. But then when we made the transition to Mennonite and then later on to Charity, they called it excommunication.
Yes. I was going to say, I actually forgot to mention that I experienced Bann and Meidung myself. But then after I left the Amish, after experiencing it myself, I actually witnessed it being used on somebody.
Yeah.
At the charity churches. And that's when I really started feeling like I was in the wrong place, because that was one of the reasons why I left the Amish church.
Yeah.
Why would I want to repeat that?
Yeah.
And it was called excommunication. Yeah, I remember that.
That's a really good question. Why would you want to repeat that?
Mm-hmm.
What you got, Naomi?
Yeah, well, and a couple of things I can identify with what Linda said there, because I know for myself, for me, it was after leaving my family's church and then being part of like a Christian fundamentalist church, and then recognizing some of the same patterns, not of excommunication and shunning so much as just some of the attitudes. And I was like, yeah, whoa,
You're like, why?
I recognize this. This is not what I came for. But, so I wonder if part of the language difference there in terms of terminology, the excommunication versus Bann, is that with like the Beachy Amish were the ones who moved away from the old order Amish to become more evangelical, like missionaries, and have Sunday school and church in English, and so then and also with the dropping of the shunning for someone who is leaving the church, like that particular denomination. The idea was, we should only shun when someone is actively living in sin.
Right.
So, so there's that shift, and that was like an important way that they were different. In fact, my grandparents left the old order in Ohio to go to Western Maryland to get away from that kind of shunning, like the kind of shunning that would split families and just they couldn't go to family reunions. Sorry, go ahead.
But the excommunication one splits families anyways. Like, they weren't really getting away from it then. You know what I'm saying? They were maybe getting away from the Bann and Meidung, as in just putting them in the Bann and Meidung if they decided to go to a different church, or if they were wearing or driving vehicles and things like that. But in reality, the shunning or excommunication, no matter what you do, is damaging and harmful. And I think that's what we need to recognize. Yeah.
And I want to point out too that I don't care what name you call it. If your actions result in shunning, which is social isolation,
right,
it is still shunning. I don't
And
care
it's
if you
that
call it a
100%.
strawberry fruitcake. It is still shunning.
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
I
And
don't care if you call it a
you
cinnamon
are
roll, a pumpkin spice latte. I don't care. It's
Yeah.
still shunning. Shunning by any other name, if it still meets the definition of shunning, is still shunning.
Mhm.
And we need to understand that.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed. And in the church I grew up in, it did happen on occasion, but it was, the idea was like, oh, well, this is reserved for the, really egregious, really serious stuff. And I think it generally was, but even so, it was still not. Yeah, agreed.
It's
I
still
totally
shunning.
agree. It's still
Well,
shunning and problematic and yeah.
Yeah.
And
What were
and
you going to say,
go
Linda?
ahead.
Sorry, Linda's
No,
been
go
trying
ahead.
to speak.
I was going to say, and another interesting point is the shunning and the Bann and Meidung, shunning and excommunication. The difference. The older the Amish had a book that talked about the Bann and Meidung, and I think that's where the differences come in, because the charity circles and some circles outside would no longer have been using those books with that language. But in the Bible, in English, they have scripture that backed their, or at least, of course, they had to have scripture that backed up their belief in excommunication. And the word excommunication was biblical. So that's why that was used.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that is very, very, very possible that could be part of why there's a difference in language there. Thank you for bringing that up. I'd like to talk about some of the consequences of shunning. Like when a person is being shunned, what were some of the consequences? Like if you were shunned, what were the consequences? You want to go, Cass? Are there consequences? Oh, you're muted.
My dogs are driving me crazy, but
No.
yeah. The way that I experience it, a lot of people experience it in different ways. For me, I laughed about it because I had to confess so many different times in so many different ways that I laughed about it afterwards. Because I thought it was funny, because the way they do it is not really the right way to do it. If that kind of explains that.
It's not
So,
really the right way to do it. But so when you were practicing, like you were in the church, you were following the life, you were doing the right things. They put you in the bond sometimes,
Mm-hmm. I was in
and
the
then
bond. I was in the bond once.
you were in the
For like,
bond.
yeah, for once. Once that was before I was married. But yeah, I was in the bond for I think 6 weeks.
6 weeks.
For doing something. I can't even remember what it was, but it was
You
I
can't
got
even.
blamed for too much stuff, and yeah.
Can we just take a moment to recognize you can't even remember what it was that you got in trouble for?
Nope.
Like just a moment. But then when you left the church, did they put you in the bond again?
Yep.
And how is that different from when you were in the church? Like, has it affected any of your relationships?
Well, it has affected relationships with the family. I can still communicate with them, but my side of the family I can see them, but the other side of the family I can't. They're not allowed going over there. Hang on.
Well, I guess we'll get to that question in a second, but I mean, I just have to wonder if that is something like, did the Beachy Amish, did they do, like if you got in trouble with the church, did they also have a bond status that they put you in or something like to the equivalent of that?
I think it was often that if someone did something and it was like maybe a repeat offense, or it was, trying to even think. A lot of those kinds of issues would be addressed in a members meeting, so not everyone would be there. So since I was if I wasn't baptized, so I was 16, so I was kind of out of it, and I would just kind of hear little bits, pieces. But my understanding is, so it was generally, it was like a repeat offense, that then they would be put on proving, for 6 months or something like that is what it was called. And that was kind of like, it wasn't shunning, but you couldn't take communion. And then,
okay.
and it was like,
I'm sorry. What does it tell the church about you as a person if you can't take communion when everybody else is taking communion?
It's all about isolation. It's all about ostracizing.
And control.
Yeah. Absolutely. So it was proving, but it wasn't shunning. We don't shun people. Did they say that too? I kind of.
No, I mean, it was just, of course. Well, okay, and then, but then, if someone continued and said, but then they would use these big broad terms, because now I'm trying to go, okay, what exactly was happening in some of those different situations? And it was a long time ago, but also it's real fuzzy in my mind. And it's like, was it just that they didn't really want to be part of the church, or they just kind of wanted to, they had, often it was like young people, but it wasn't frequent. It wasn't frequent, but, yeah. But it was the same dynamic of ostracizing someone because they don't conform.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
Public humiliation. Public humiliation. I'm telling you, I don't care if it's a lollipop, a cinnamon roll, whatever you want to call it, shunning, and you're trying to publicly humiliate somebody because you have power over them.
Yeah.
Period. Done.
Well, that's their thing that they like doing. That's their point. They want to humiliate you till they're blue in the face.
They're trying to break you down into submission.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And also it serves a twofold purpose, don't you think? When they publicly humiliate somebody like that, when you see that, what does that invoke in you?
Fear.
Yeah. It's a warning to everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. And so then when you follow the rules because you're afraid that you're going to be next up there, are you not operating entirely out of fear-based responses?
Yeah. Well, and I don't know how it was for you guys, but like, especially as a kid, because I'm also thinking about the terminology, like what they would say when they would like announce it to the church, because then I can't remember exactly how they said it. Mary, it's probably similar to the churches you were in, but they would make the comment that we are now handing this person over to Satan for the destruction of their body so that their soul can be saved. And that is terrifying as a little kid. And especially when they're doing it to someone that like, someone that's like part of your family or your friends.
And that makes me just want to go. Isn't that just so Christ-like?
Yes. But also like,
no.
I mean, that's a scripture. They're quoting scripture there. But like, also, how does that line up with Anabaptist teachings? Like,
conscientious objectors here. Why are we invoking violence towards our members?
Yeah, we all claim to be pacifists. We can't fight. We can't harm people because that's not who we are. We have to forgive. Until it comes to
so much violence.
Yes,
but it's okay to kill the spirit. It's okay to kill the person inside, just as long as you don't murder them outside.
Because this is church sanctioned and holy, isn't it?
Oh, and
it's based on the Bible. It's based on the Bible, so it's got to be right.
Yeah. And if I read the Bible and I said that Well, what about the Beatitudes where, blessed are all of these people? If I said that, then what?
Another thing that never made sense to me is there's no shunning in heaven. If you believe in heaven, then and there's no shunning, why are you shunning on earth? Like, that just doesn't make sense to me.
That's a really good question. But I do want to also raise, kind of like going back to how this shunning is enacted, because Katherine was talking about relationships with family members. And I did want to hear more about that if Katherine wanted to talk about that.
But yeah, like I was saying, I have a good relationship with my side of the family. My husband's side of the family, I just talked to his one sister and actually his two sisters and his one brother I still talk to, but the rest of the family, they don't want to talk to us. They rather just sit down and write big ass long letters, 3 or 4 pages long, telling us how wrong we are for leaving. I'm just like, I am so much happier out here than I was when I was Amish. Because I always got blamed for certain things. And it's just, I got tired of it. Because I wasn't the one doing the things wrong.
Yeah.
They are the ones sitting there judging that they are in the wrong. And it's just, I just got blamed for so much stuff that finally I was like, oh, I'm done.
Yeah.
And those letters are a real
all
thing.
and blame it on somebody else.
They always got to have somebody to pick on, don't they? Every church district.
Yeah.
They always have that one family, that one group. Oh, and that one person that's so much worse in that settlement than everybody else, don't they?
Yeah.
Well, to be honest, we had a group a little bit in our church that there were four ladies that kind of bunched together, and they were the main ones that they loved to pick fights with certain people. But after we left, I found some things out that they were saying behind our backs, and it came back to the family. My mom wasn't going to tell me about it because she said she knows how frustrated I am, and she knows how much it hurts to hear those certain things. And finally, I just said, Mom, I don't want to hear it anymore. Don't bring it up. I don't need to know what they're saying. All I want is for them to think about themselves first before they start talking about somebody else that has struggles with infertility. We had marriage struggles a little bit. I had struggles with depression for years. Stuff like that. They have to look over themselves before they stop speaking about others. That's for sure.
Thank you for being vulnerable with all of that. That's a lot to carry. Is it okay if I ask some questions about the infertility?
Sure.
Because if I understand correctly, they were talking about your infertility and almost like making you a social outcast because you were infertile.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I've struggled for years. I had a stillborn at 19, which that was fine. Everything went perfect. But then, after we got married, we just had miscarriages one after another. We've been married for 9 years. So it's been a struggle. It's been hard, but it's gonna take time for me to actually accept the fact that I'm not fertile enough or something. something's wrong with my body that I can't figure out. I don't know. Am I not getting enough probiotics? Am I not getting enough calcium and stuff like that, magnesium and all that? So I have started taking magnesium, zinc, and probiotics, and I have started taking vitamins. So
Maybe. I mean, I really hope that you find some kind of peace with everything in life, whichever way that goes. And we're here for you. Thank you very, very much. Did you have
You're welcome.
anything else you wanted to add? Okay. Well, with that being said, so if I understand correctly, I'm going to ask Linda because Linda was also shunned directly. And
Yes.
Naomi, you were not. They wish they could have. And Ruth, you were not. Okay. So Linda, since you were shunned, how were you affected?
So for me, I was cut off completely from everybody. The circle letters stopped coming around. The writing, the newsletters and stuff that we stayed connected and communicated with each other. They stopped sending them to me. My whole family never wrote. None of them. Not. Well, I think my oldest sister may have one time, and I always don't really understand that. Like, why only one time? Why not more? And why not like? Why doesn't my family write? I don't know. My parents, we didn't see each other for years, and we're at a point now where we will write occasionally, maybe a couple times a year, but I'm not at a place where I can visit them. And so, yeah, shunning is still current for me, and it's been 15 years. So when people try and say that, oh, well, they shun, but it's not really shunning. You can still see your family, whatever. That may be true for some, but there's some of us that is not true, and it never lets up. No matter what we do, like it doesn't matter. I can't do anything right the only thing I can do right in their mind is join back into the church, and I really don't care. I really don't care at this point, to join back. I mean, I don't care at this point about the shunning, but I do care about the trauma that comes with it. Like, I don't care. The shunning's not going to manipulate me into doing something they want. It has no control over me. Whatever they think they're trying to do to me, they're actually harming themselves more. They're harming their relationships with people. Like, it's causing them more hurt than anybody else, to be honest.
Yeah. And Christina says, my dad would always say there is no shunning in heaven. He would also say, you don't shun people, you shun the sin. Thank you, Christina. But yeah. So
I mean, it sounds nice, but that's a lot of words, but that's all it is. How do you shun the sin?
I want to know too. But maybe we should avoid the sin.
Well, here's the thing. A lot of people. Well, that's what I was just gonna say. A lot of people say that, and they literally end up shunning the person because they don't know how to shun the sin.
Oh,
yeah.
And I don't know how to shun the sin either.
That too.
I just want to say I've been shunned for 20 years. It is a badge of honor at this point. I mean,
Absolutely.
However, there are consequences that I personally have experienced. Like every time that I go fill out paperwork, I'm, not a 20-year-old anymore, obviously, because I've been shunned 20 years, right? But Like when I go out and fill out paperwork, and for example, if you start talking about end of life paperwork, life insurance paperwork, or even if you have a 401k, you're lucky enough to have something like that, or a retirement plan or savings account, you have to fill out, designate beneficiaries and designate executors of this. Who am I supposed to put down? Furthermore, if you have minor children and you have nobody,
Yeah.
who should you put down?
Yep.
And I would also like to say that I wasn't shunned formally while I was still practicing. But when I escaped, I escaped, I reported the abuse, and they broke their own rules to put me into Bann. Because the process kind of went like this for us. It was somebody had a misdeed, and either the ministry, which includes the bishop, the ministers, and the deacon for us, either the ministry would decide it was a problem, or somebody would even go to the ministry and förlåt. They had to go. How do you translate that?
Say it again.
Förlåt.
Förlåt.
Oh, complain?
Yeah, where
Was
they're
it
like,
complain?
yeah, it's complaining. I
Okay.
could.
Yeah.
So they would be complaining to the ministry about you.
Yeah.
And that could even be somebody from outside the church, by the way. So all of the dominant culture people that find it funny to go report
Or
on
think it's a vacation.
or, if you think it's just a slap on the wrist or whatever, I want you to hear this. It's funny how y'all can interfere when you think I'm listening to the radio or I'm watching TV, and I'm not supposed to do that. But when you think children are being SA'd, you don't give a flying F about it. What does that say about you? Maybe you should check your privilege right about now, because it must take some kind of privilege to live in that world. And I don't live there. I've never lived there. I've never had the luxury of pretending that is how I can conduct myself. But anyways, the ministry would then, the bishop would be the ultimate deciding factor, but they would then decide. The bishop would send his little lackeys, his little minions. If you're playing like a game, right? Let's just say you're playing a game. He would send his little minions, usually a deacon and a minister, because the deacon was pretty much the bishop's little errand boy, kind of like a servant, supposed to uphold all of the bishop's orders and go talk to that errant member. And because they can't go talk to somebody by themselves, they have to take a minister with him, because that minister had to make sure that everything is above a reproach. And then they would come talk to you. And for us, it was usually after dark, because everybody had to work all day long, every day. This was just an additional duty. They'd come knock on the door after dark, and they'd ask to speak to such and such. And then they would take you away from everybody else and then turn around and they would take whatever you said in there. It's kind of like, have you ever heard anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law? Well, this was the court of the Amish bishop and his lackeys right there. They would take it back. The whole ministry would get together. They'd freaking discuss it. Then they come back and tell you if they thought you were truly repentant or what your disciplinary action should be. Like, do you have to be put in the Bann? They tell you, but you wouldn't be formally put in the Bann until, we went to church on Sunday. And for us, we only had church every 2 weeks. And so when we had the next church Sunday, they would say, after the last song, all baptized members remain seated. And then they would also name you as having to give the church space. So when all the children went out, you went out too as the member in trouble, because that wasn't putting you on the spotlight as being in trouble with the church at all. And then The bishop would tell the church what your sin was, and then the church would take a vote. Now, here's the thing. Is it really a vote? If members vote yes out of fear, they might be next on the chopping block.
Yeah.
Otherwise, that can lead to church splits, which we all know all about.
Oh, yeah.
Peachy Amish over here. Anyways. Then they would, as long as they had what they called the anyhow vote, which is like a consensus, a greater consensus, everybody agreed that the member was repentant. They would bring the member back in, and then sometimes if it was like for a minor infraction, they might have you sit on a bench and confess. But for me personally, I was made to get on my knees in front of the entire church.
So did I, Mary.
And put my hands in my lap, bow my head, slump my shoulders appropriately, and then tell the church, after the bishop said it first, because my words would clearly not be enough, I have to repeat after him. Because we always need to be led by the men in charge of us. Right?
We don't have a voice. We can't use our own voice in public settings, that's for sure.
Yes.
Yep.
And then I had to say, kan bekennen sig fel ha. För Gud gick mig förspröv alltså sort dras nog tjeot bestå här.
But I
probably a few more things.
But I do have to say, Kristen, do women vote too? Yes, absolutely.
Yes, they do. But I will tell you, when I got baptized, I was literally instructed that I have to vote the same way that my husband, father, or men in charge of me tell me to vote.
Wow.
Or how they vote. So, I mean, was it really a vote?
No.
It's
the same. It's the same with rådnemers. I was told when I got baptized into the church that I would always have to say "bin enig med." That's how I was told. I wasn't even given a choice. I wasn't even given a choice to disagree with anything.
That's the vote, Linda. That's the vote.
Yeah.
They taught you that you have to say you agree with the Vorstellung. Yeah. It's a controlled vote. Edna got this.
Yeah.
It's a controlled vote.
Thanks, Edna.
Thank you. That's right.
But I do want to say this, Mary.
Yes.
When they do the communion and Grossmeer
is communion church. Yes.
I never gave them my vote. Like, to any rule, I never did.
How did you get away with it?
Yeah.
No.
How did you get away?
Every time that I had to do that, before I had to give my vote, I walked out.
You had to go take care of something.
I left before they could tell me that.
Det innebär stoppgivelse. Vad innebär stoppgivelse?
Yeah. I left. I just up and left.
You were able to you were able to walk away and not say it and still take communion?
Look,
I
would real quick that going to the
because we told the preacher beforehand that our vote doesn't matter because we don't want to be in that vote. And this was the spring when we decided to leave in May. We told them we'll come to church, we'll come to communion, but we're not going to give our vote because we're going to be shoved in if they don't need our vote. So yeah, not even a week later, we left, and I felt so good about myself when I did that. I was so proud of myself. I was like, "Oh yay! I don't have to give my vote. I can go do what I want to do, and this is how it's gonna work." Yeah.
Yeah.
Wants to know, does women voting serve an appearance purpose? Like, see, everyone who agrees,
Yep.
we are fair to
Mhm.
women, but give no actual autonomy. Oh, Kristen, I could just give you the biggest hug. That is the
That's it.
point.
Yes.
Yep.
Because that voting is all by raise of hand. It's not like secret ballot. It's all raise of hand. So yeah, it's all performance.
Mhm.
And yeah, and here's the interesting thing, Mary. You describing the whole thing with the deacon and the ministers and that whole process. That's what I grew up with. That happened all the that totally carried over.
Oh, I guess they didn't stray very far after all, did they?
No.
Nope.
But it's also indicative, like I always say, the beachy Amish, like they're like a subculture of Amish and
Yeah.
Mennonite church.
Oh yeah, for
They're
sure.
not like exactly the same, but there are similarities, and that's
Yeah.
why I have to say that, because there are some things so vastly different, and others are just like, oh my God, no, that's not the way,
Mhm.
Right. And I think another kind of layer here. I mean, like, so my dad was a deacon. And so growing up. And he got tasked with a lot of that. Here you go get on this. But it was often like in-laws. Like, and so like they would create, I mean, in retrospect now, like it was creating all kinds of strained relationships, or at least putting relationships at risk between other family members. Like when I think back now to all the way those, the relation, it was so tight, and all this. And so when these ministers are doing this, it's often layered with family dynamics.
Mhm.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, they take other people's information off of them, but they don't take yours. So they rather shun you instead of the other person.
They don't, because they
Yeah.
don't believe that you're telling the truth, Cass.
Right.
They've decided, the ministry gets to decide who is telling the truth, which goes back to kind of like that thing. There's still more I gotta say about this, because we gotta continue along this pathway so we can complete the live stream in an hour and kind of cover all the topics we want to talk about, right? Like, I'm not trying to, maybe we need to have another panel discussion about it. But one of the other things is like watching people get shunned. If somebody in our family was shunned, if they were put in the bond by the church, like they would be seated at a table in a separate room for all 3 meals of the day. If they went to church, like they were seated at a separate table. They were not allowed to eat from the same bowls as the rest of the family or even the church community. And then another point is nobody was supposed to take anything from their hand, and they weren't supposed to take any money from them. And they also would not be supposed to engage in any dialogue outside of advising the member who is being disciplined by the church to be repentant. And again, the ministry had ultimate control of when they decided that the person was repentant and bring it back to the church for a, quote, sham vote. You can quote me on that. It was a sham vote.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So when you think about that, did it affect, like, if what Naomi was just saying, and Katherine and Ruth and Linda, like, y'all are talking about this very openly, and I really appreciate that. But if you saw or witnessed, like, maybe you weren't indirectly shunned, but if your loved ones were affected by this kind of like separating a person out, and kind of like, how a narcissistic abuser will separate and isolate his victims, or her, they will isolate the victim from their family. Like, that's kind of how these church dynamics are sounding right now.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then, were you affected by that? Because, like, for me, I didn't understand that. I was like, what? Like, I had an uncle who left the church when I was fairly young, who, like, he took like my first cousins with him, and like the way they talked about them, it was awful.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And like, it really created this, like, I don't understand. I'm a child. Like, why should I be afraid of them just because they wear different clothes?
Yeah.
Right.
And isn't Well, I have I know of a situation that might be relevant here. But I'll save that till after others have talked about their personal experiences with it. But I think it's so interesting how that dynamic you just described, Mary, is it creates this distrust between people who leave and people who are maybe thinking about leaving. And then it's like when you are thinking about leaving, you go, but I'm not like them. I'm not like them. I'm going to do it right. And of course, then you find out like, well, nobody can.
We're all in the same boat.
We're all in the
whether
same
you
boat.
recognize it or
But
not.
But isn't there like a ton
It
of
creates
distrust?
Well, yes, it creates all this distrust, but it also does this thing where it creates this us versus them mentality. And that's
Right.
what's objectively being engaged in that moment. And so like it creates distrust. Like, I wouldn't be able to trust them necessarily. I would be afraid of them rather than reaching out to them for support or assistance or,
Yes.
like I
Right.
wouldn't have the ability to see past that without dismantling that notion that just because somebody wears dominant culture clothing, they are automatically harmful. And we don't know if there's any hope for their soul.
Right.
Yeah.
Because
But I guess what I'm saying is like, yes, I totally agree with that. But I guess I'm talking about when even after, I'll talk about it in terms of my own experience, that I found like even after I left, there were people who had left before me that I still kind of held in suspicion a little bit. And I think it was like that.
You held them in suspicion, like you looked at them as if like, well, you just don't know if they're a good person.
Yeah.
You just don't know that they're
right,
trustworthy.
because their
You don't know
reputation
that
was
they're
damaged.
kind. You
Exactly.
don't know.
Yes.
You don't know
Yes.
that they even, have any kind of compassion and empathy, or could even be capable of doing anything good or right in the world. Because
And then what that does, it like cuts us off from each other. Those of us who leave, it kind of cuts us off from each other, even after we leave, when there's this kind of suspicion or even, if we've been forced to shun someone and then we ourselves are shunned, that person that we shunned before could still feel betrayed by us for having shunned them. You know what I mean? So it's like, it cuts off those relationships when you stay, and also when you leave, it's not like all that goes away, and those relationships are automatically restored.
Well, and by and large, one of the things that I've experienced is people who they escape the Amish church, but they hold on to very homophobic and racist and colonistic ideology. And I myself am queer. I am openly queer. And if I repeatedly know that one, you're going around behind my back telling people all of these bad things about me because I need to repent from my queerness, that's a you problem.
Yeah.
But I also have very strong boundaries.
Yeah.
I'm not going to engage with people who do that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I don't
You have to protect yourself.
I don't owe you that. But you know what you can do? You can sit there and you can dismantle your own ideology. Why it is that you think it is justified to be harmful towards other people because of that. Or the other part that I've encountered repetitively is people who think, because I am very passionate about actively talking about the issues that we experience, and specifically, I love that I get the honor of hosting this panel, elevating the voices of Amish race women and AFAB people. Like Amish race women don't really have a lot of autonomy in their actual lived experiences.
They don't have a voice.
Matter. So I care about that. But if you think that my passion is making me angry, that's again a you perception, not me.
Yeah. Yep.
And even if I was angry, who are you that you don't get heated up over injustice?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And also,
that-
you like, because this is something that I've told people. I've earned the damn right to be angry. I've earned the damn right to be sensitive. Like, you don't get to tell me that I can't be feeling these. I've earned the rights.
Right.
For once in your life, sit down and listen to my anger.
Yes.
Yep.
So, with that being said, when we experience our loved ones being shunned, would y'all say that it felt like a moral injury? Do you know what a moral injury is?
I'm not sure I understand the definition of it. I mean, I have an idea.
I can look up the actual definition of it.
Mary, do you have the, I mean, I've
Yes,
heard the
do.
term.
Hold on.
Okay.
I'll give it to
Okay.
you. So, like, according to Disabled American Veterans, a moral injury is when one feels they have violated their conscience or moral compass when they take part in, witness, or fail to prevent an act that disobeys their own moral values or personal principles. And what is that? When you are asked to legitimately not engage in the actions that tell your loved ones that you love them as part of the community of origin or the family of origin that you belong to.
Yep.
Okay, I get it. That makes a lot of sense.
Because I mean, like, often I've spoken with quite a few second generation removed from practicing Amish people who, even though they were not directly shunned, their loved ones were shunned.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Or even some people's children, when they escape and they are put in the bond, their family members may write them out of their family book. And if you don't know what the family book is, hey, look, guess what? I got one right here. This is my family book. It goes all the way back to who came off the boat. Jacob Byler. Anyway.
And it wasn't the Pilgrims, was it?
No, it was Jacob Byler. It was Jacob Byler. So anyway, so my point is there can even be long-term repercussions there from being shunned. Because the other part is what happens to those connections that your children or your future generations would have with their Amish relatives were you not being shunned.
Yes. Yeah.
And then
Go
ahead.
I was just going to say, like, and I feel like this is kind of referencing back to Naomi, what Naomi said earlier is like how Amish claim to be all about the family unit, right? But will, without a second thought, do their best to try to tear up family units with the shunning to control the narrative. Because my mom, bless her, and unfortunately, we don't have much contact. And that was a really, really difficult decision. But she is one of the most, like, after years of therapy, I can see how she is a victim of the culture.
Mm-hmm.
And she was the bishop's daughter. So when my dad decided to leave, she had to choose between her father, which was the bishop, or her husband. And so her entire life, she has been taught that basically her salvation is being a good, submissive wife. But now she's getting these letters that are telling her that she's going to hell, but also telling her that, like, I remember as a kid reading this letter from my grandparents and like her sisters telling her that if she comes, like, she can bring the kids back and they'll give us a house and they'll take care of us, like advocating for my mom to leave my dad to, like, make a point.
Yeah.
But yet she's supposed to be submissive to her husband, right?
And
Yeah.
submissive in this
Wow.
case equates to obedience, does it not? So how is she supposed to have a hope of making it into heaven if she disobeys him and goes off like that?
It's crazy.
Ooh,
It's always a new version of the rules when you need it.
we just make it up. Is that what you're saying?
Yep, pretty much.
Well, and I think,
Yeah.
I think often my hunch is that often what made the decision about who was going to get in trouble for what or not, because I know about things that happened to like respected people in the community that was completely brushed under the rug and never addressed. But if somebody else did that, then that was grounds for serious action in the church. And it seems it kind of came down to who was going to make the community look good or not. Like if word gets out that this respected person in the community did this, okay, so let's pretend it didn't happen. But if it's someone who's lower in the hierarchy, well, then they'll make us look bad, so we will make an example of them.
It's that ladder. It's that ladder. It's that ladder. They're just on the lower rung of the ladder. They don't have any of that privilege. And then
they will make an example of them. Yeah.
Yes.
But nobody knows, nobody finds out about the stuff that the respected people do. They're doing stuff too.
Because the rules get applied differently based on where you fall on that ladder.
Yeah.
Just like when the minister's son is drinking until he falls out the buggy because he's so drunk, and somebody else's kid does that, or it's the deacon's son, or it's the bishop's son, or I got a good one, when the bishop's daughter has premarital sex.
Ooh.
Oops. I just broke so many rules.
Hey, you might as well let it out, Mary.
But anyway, so like that rule is going to be applied entirely different if it's somebody else's kid, because that ladder, the bishop's up here and their children are down here. And then the other part is when you have the men versus women rules applied differently.
Yep.
Totally.
Have you ever seen anybody have an example of that? Like if a man does something versus if a woman does something, how are the rules applied?
Absolutely, I have seen it.
I just have a question. I don't know if I should go here, but if you don't want to answer this, Katherine, you don't have to. But if a man is on his deathbed and they allow non-practicing Amish people to come care for him, what does it say when he passes away? They're allowed to be with him, say their goodbyes, attend the funeral, everything is Gucci. But when his wife is perhaps facing a terminal illness, she's not allowed to have the support of non-practicing Amish people because they're just so awful. What does that say to you? And is it possible that could happen?
Well, I'm gonna put it this way. They personally for me, because I've seen it happen. It has happened in my family, and it's ridiculous. But anyway, they let them come for the guy, which is, they're all fine and dandy with that. But if the wife has any contact or anything to do with it, it's so wrong. They can't. They have to stay away. Why?
What is the difference besides gender?
Right. I don't get it.
I think some of it is
so much other things. But as soon as the wife does it, oh no, that's forbidden. You're not allowed to do that.
I think some of it is, once again, control. The men, for some reason, have a lot more control in the community. and are respected. Like the men are almost like catered to in every way
Yep.
possible. So if the guy wanted that, then the guy got that. But
Yep.
then when it comes to him passing on and the wife is left behind, the church has control. So then the church does whatever the fuck they want. I'm sorry, excuse my language. They do whatever they want with women. Really. When like women are so unprotected if they don't have a husband.
It's
be
because the
honest.
women don't have a voice, Linda.
Oh,
Yeah.
well,
Yep.
or that they don't listen to the women's voice, right? Women have voices.
Yeah,
but
I
they're-
mean, they have a voice, but they won't listen.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
was silenced so many times just before I left. It's crazy. That's why I left.
Yeah.
Like, I'm
Yeah.
like, you know what? You know
Same.
what? I'm taking my control back. I'm leaving the church. That's what I went with.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even tell people why we left. Because it's none of their
No,
business.
no, I didn't really go around telling people that. That was my attitude.
Yeah.
I remember thinking that, like, when I saw what was happening, things around me, and how much they were trying to control me, I was like, you know what? I'm taking my control back. I'm
Absolutely.
leaving. I'm leaving you all.
Well, then I
Yeah.
want
Peace.
to find out.
Peace.
Well, Mary knows a little bit
Yeah.
of my story, of why I left. I'm just gonna put it this way: my cousin and her family have been through some rough times the last 3 years. Not only they had to go to a facility, which I told them no in the first place. They should have listened. She told me afterwards they should have listened to me. They had their kids taken away for 3 years. They're just now getting their custody back. They're going through the court system, fighting with everything that they have towards the people that have done this to them, that have told them why they have to go. And the reason that they gave them was not the reason that they told them that they're going to go, that they have to go. And they had to, their lawyer and counselor have worked together. Their counselor had told the lawyer it's time to shut certain people off in the family. They got restraining orders on all the church members that were in that church. Plus, on top of
Wow.
that, yes, the bishop too. The ministry, the support group. If you know what how the Amish have a support group, then that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
they have a support group. They have a restraining order on the support group, and they have a restraining order on the people that had the kids, including the two youngest ones that she just had about a year and a half, or a year ago. And then she just had another one. They tried to take that one away, and she said, "Oh, hell no, you ain't doing that. You have a restraining order on you. If you don't respect the restraining order and give the kids back through the court, all of you have consequences to suffer."
Send them all to jail. Damn.
Yep. And I found out a couple weeks ago that my cousin is not the only one that had restraining orders against the bishop. There are 4 or 5 different families in that church that have restraining orders on him. If he violates any one of those, he could be in jail tomorrow.
How the tides have turned.
I hope they do that more and more and more, because it needs to be done a lot more than it is being done. I hope lawyers start stepping up. See, that was another thing I was going to point out when Mary said about the church being the Amish courtroom. Well, the thing that's lacking in the church is the defendant doesn't, the person that is being punished or accused cannot have a lawyer.
Oh yeah.
That's what's wrong in the Amish church.
Oh, my cousin
So
has
they
one.
can't.
And a damn good
No,
one.
I mean like on a Sunday at the church, you can't have like your own personal lawyer there trying to reason with people. There's no reasoning. It's just whatever the minister says. That's what we do. There's no like lawyer. But people need to start realizing they can go outside the church and they can get a lawyer. They need to start doing things like that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, and if you think about the process that Mary described and how that disempowers the person who's being accused, like, taking them out away from family or loved ones who maybe could
Yep.
be an advocate for them. And then in church, when it's brought before the church, they're not even there to hear what they're accused of. They can't even defend themselves. Like there's
Right.
no, yeah.
And even, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Even if they would be allowed to like be there to physically hear it, they wouldn't be allowed to speak up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No negotiating. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all the only negotiating that, I mean, as close as it gets to negotiating, the only conversation and discussion that takes place is private, where the ministry, they get to decide what was said. They get to decide.
And they have two of them versus one of you.
Exactly. It's stacked. It is stacked against.
And the other thing that bothers me a lot, because I had a friend tell me this experience that he had where he was accused of something and it was false witness because he never did it, but nobody believed it because the minister said it happened. So they can lie. They can literally lie because they don't rely on pictures and videos. So they rely on gossip pretty much. Somebody, a high ranking member in the church, can make up a story about somebody and go to the bishop in the ministry and say, oh, well, this is what I saw. And he could be lying. And they'll still act on that. They'll act on that.
And then they'll tell you and they'll teach you far too often that if you suffer because somebody lied about you, you're suffering for Jesus, and it's better for you to suffer on this side.
Don't defend yourself.
You don't want to go to eternity, and then not make it to heaven because you were awfully unforgiving about this person who lied about you and you were bitter about them making you suffer. And like Edna says, no one would believe them even if they could speak up. And that, unfortunately, is the sad truth. I do want to ask each of you if there's one final thing, generational consequences, if you have any thoughts about that. Are there any generational consequences that you personally may have experienced or seen of shunning, like of being put in the Bann or the Meidung, or experiencing like having to enforce that, which is like that moral injury again?
Yes.
Yeah,
I do.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I have to make it quick because I know we're running out of time, but I had asked my daughter, one of my daughters, 3 questions on how it affects her. Like, she was born Amish, but she left when she was like 2-3 years old. So she shouldn't be shunned, but yet she's shunned. She experiences all the consequences. And I asked her, I said, how did it make you feel when you witnessed the way your parents were treated? And the answer was, I always wished the first one was, it made me sad and angry to see my relatives who should have been my family push my parents away because of their lifestyle choices. It it didn't seem it seemed so unfair, is what she said. And then the next question, how did it make you feel to witness the way your parents were and are? I mean, how was it growing up having a lot of extended family but not able to associate with them? And her answer was, I always wished I knew what it was like to have grandparents who wanted to be around me and also around my parents, no matter what we did or who we were. And the last question, how does it feel to be shunned even though you never wronged anyone and don't even know most of the people who currently shun you? Her answer was, I felt so isolated. All this support we could have had was robbed from us because of one simple rule. We can't function in mainstream society because of it. We aren't educated and are more likely to break laws and do offensive things. For the longest time, we were afraid to even go to school because of how badly brainwashed my parents were. And like when she is talking about isolation, these are a lot of her memories of the earlier years. It doesn't mean that everything is now currently happening, but those are things she experienced as we were transitioning. The isolation was awful,
Mhm.
you know. The yeah, just a lot of things like that. So I'm going to leave it at that.
Thank you
Wow.
for sharing that with us. That is, it's, I don't really have words.
It's sad.
It's,
It's sad how it affects people.
well, and
Mhm.
it's not right. Our
Right.
children should have grandparents.
Right.
Our children should be able to function in society.
And the
Our,
thing is, she even wanted to. She tried going visiting, but just the way they even treated her, like it didn't. She doesn't even want to anymore.
Right.
yeah,
That's so sad.
that's
Yes.
awful.
That is sad.
And I think really for me, what I want to say is I want to say our children don't deserve that. They are children. They were
Yep.
children. They didn't deserve that. They did nothing to warrant that kind of social isolation, and yet they are still the recipients of it. Because why? Mandated shunning, my friends. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah.
But what you got, Ruth?
I think like I relate to my core to what Linda said, you know, like with her daughter's experience. And you know, I haven't spoken to some of my cousins, you know, that I grew up with till about 12, you know. Like we lived, I mean, because you guys know what the Amish community is like you spend so much time with them, like you're together on the holidays and you're together during the week, and you know, like you're canning together, you're butchering together, like it's such a community environment, and then all of a sudden that's ripped away from you so violently. And I just remember being heartbroken. And you know, I had a cousin. We shared the same birth date. My name is Ruth. Her name was Leela Ruth, you know? So we were besties for years. And I remember the feeling of like writing her letter after letter after letter
Mm.
and never receiving an answer. And just, you know, like that, the way that realization slowly like sunk in that I wasn't going to hear back from her, you know, and that like it was over. And you know, there was other cousins that I wasn't quite as close to, but like it's just, I mean, you're left with nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And then like how, you know, now like that, like all we ever knew, like our very life, the way we knew it was taken away from us, and we're like thrust into this whole new world that we don't know anything about.
We've lost all the societal norms that are comfortable and familiar, and now we have all these people who want to hug us everywhere we go, every interaction, everywhere we go, and we don't hug people.
Oh my God, you were Amish? Oh, their cinnamon rolls are the best. And
oh my God, I love their butter. No, their furniture. I'm just, oh my God, I have this piece of furniture I bought from this Amish store. Oh, my neighbors. I grew up next to the Amish. Yeah, I mean, we're.
Oh my gosh,
They're such nice people. They work so hard. You know, nothing's wrong there.
Oh my God, why would you ever leave?
Well, and
You're
that's
so
what I was
lucky.
going to say. That's what I was going to say, like when I was giving my daughter's experience, then you have to deal with the whole other level of people saying, well, why did you leave? Why did you leave then if you knew it was going to be harmful? Like we have a choice. I mean, sorry.
And then the people, the icing on the cake. Why would you ever tell anybody that you were Amish? You're labeling yourself, so aren't you bringing it upon yourself? How do you want me to explain my societal and cultural norms that I literally have because I grew up that way?
Or the way they feel just like entitled to ask the most ridiculous, intrusive questions that you would never ask of a normal
Here's my
person.
favorite. What do Amish women wear under the dresses?
I had someone literally, she comes running up to me. She's like, oh my God, I heard you grew up Amish. What do Amish women wear to have sex?
Oh my God. What everybody else wears. Jeez.
Or maybe nothing. Oh, maybe nothing.
Same.
Maybe it's none of your business. Maybe it's none of you know, like maybe those are private questions and we don't have to answer your questions.
Oh, and she goes on to say that she drove over an hour to find an Amish community and to drive around looking at their clotheslines.
And my goodness.
And then she got offended because I didn't want to talk to her.
That's gross.
Oh, man.
So gross. And I was so upset. I was like,
well, why do you think my clothesline was at the back of the house so nobody could see it?
Why do you think I use a dryer now? Why do you think I use a dryer now?
Linda, that's not demure. Using a dryer, not demure. You win the internet today.
No, hanging your underwear between the towels and the sheets, very mindful. Very mindful.
I feel a little personally offended by that description of hanging out your laundry because, you know, you also have to make sure that there was like specific things hung on the ends of the lines when you did that so you could hide your underwears.
Yes.
Yeah.
I never hid mine. I didn't know we were supposed to.
Linda, was verdammt verwasst du?
Ich weiß nicht, weil ich habe sie nie wie versteckt. Ich habe nie gewusst, dass du like
God forbid people see them. Yes. You had to hang them in the middle.
She was stalking clotheslines. Yeah, because, you know.
Absolutely, Edna.
100%.
But anyways, we should probably bring this to a close. And I just want to give everybody the opportunity to say some parting words. Like if anybody listening to this has experienced shunning, is experiencing shunning, or, you know, is part of a group that is requiring them or mandating them to shun somebody because there is a fear of escaping, what would you say to them, Naomi?
I think in especially in light of the podcast that I co-host, Uncovered Life Beyond, so many of us who come out of these backgrounds have experienced educational neglect. Like we've not had the opportunities that we should have had, that we deserve to have. And I just want to say to anyone who feels that loss. I know that loss, but also please know that it's because someone kept those opportunities from you. There's nothing about you that makes you any less capable or any less intelligent or any less deserving of education or whatever it is that you want to pursue, and you don't need anyone's permission to do it.
Yes.
Thank you so much. What
That is
about you,
powerful.
Ruth?
Gosh, I still kind of laser focused in on what she just said because that was amazing.
It is.
I think what I would like to say to the women that are leaving is don't let people treat you like a zoo animal. You don't owe them that. You don't owe them that. Don't let them ask intrusive questions. Don't let them like speak over your experience by trying to like be like, "Oh, well, have you watched this movie? Have you read that book? Like I saw this." Don't let them do that to you. And then to everybody else that's not an Amish woman or AFAB person, like Naomi said earlier, we have voices. Please don't try to speak for us. Even if you are Amish or like former Amish men, for the love of God, please don't try to speak for us. Instead, listen to us. Because we can talk for ourselves, and we will.
Hallelujah. Thank you, Ruth.
Yeah.
You know, I don't even know how I'm going to make it through 4 of these and then give my little spiel. Y'all got voices. Whew. We do have voices. What about you, Linda?
I want to speak to the Amish that are still Amish. Stand up. Use your voices. Fight from within. Because there's only so much that we can do on the outside. We can do a lot, but you can do a lot in the inside too. Like, stand up, get lawyers, fight things. Don't let them take your children away. Don't let them lock you up in mental health facilities. Don't. You're violating your human rights. It's not right. It's wrong. You have rights. The church never has that much power over you. Never should have that much power over you. You don't have to have support groups. You don't have to have people following you around and watching every move you do just to make sure that you're dressing right and things like that. You don't have to do those things. Stand up and fight. You know, we're here. We're encouraging you. We're behind you. We see you. We hear you. And we're always, if you need to go to talk to anybody, you can always come to us, and we will respect you as a human being and what you want to do. That is what I want to say.
Yep. And one more thing, you don't need people to manage your money. Thank you.
Exactly, Mary. Exactly that.
And Edna says, start walking and don't look
Don't
back.
look back. Exactly.
What
Yes.
about you, Katherine?
I'm gonna say this. If you feel like you are being used, leave the situation. Talk to a professional, a therapist, something. Find your way out and keep going down that path, because it's not fun being in the situation that you are in, from my perspective. Because when you have somebody talking behind your back, you have people that are trying to control you in every way, shape, form, however it is, turn your backs and walk away from it, because it's going to hurt you more if you stay there and not get away from that situation. But also, from my perspective, I had when I started actually seeing things happening around me that actually offended me in a certain way, hurt my feelings, I had to put my feelings inside and say, okay, it's enough. Enough is enough. You know, you gotta walk away. Just let it go. Just go wherever you want to go. or go where you need to go and, find that person that has helped you out in a certain way and just take it as far as you can go to get out. Because in the end, you're going to be a lot more happier. You're going to be a lot more respectful to people. You're going to start using your own voice. Just speak it out. Just let it be known, because that's all we can do. We don't need somebody to talk for us.
Yeah.
The way that they do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not only that, but Katherine brings up a really good point, and that is that you are allowed to set boundaries. If you are listening to this and you're experiencing any of these aspects of shunning, I want you to know, like, you cannot perhaps change how other people will believe and what they will respond to. But you know what you
Yeah.
can do, what Katherine was pointing out, you can walk away. You can do what Linda was pointing out. You can also fight back. You can raise awareness. You can introduce conversations that need to be had that maybe perhaps provoke critical thinking about the actual situation. And why are we pretending that isolating people socially is love? Is that really love, or is it more
No.
transactional in nature? Is it like, as long as you do this thing, then, you are loved, you are worthy, you are whole? I'm here to tell you that I believe in more humanist principles, which is that every person is equally good and equally bad. And
But I also want to add, Mary, before
yes,
I forget it. But when you set your boundaries, set them the way you want your boundaries to be. Don't let other
Right.
people set your boundaries, because it's not gonna go the way you planned or the way you wanted it to. For a lot of people, for my own sake, I had to set my own boundaries with certain people within my community, because if I didn't and they crossed over that line, I felt like I was being punished for no reason.
Yeah.
And I don't like when people talk for me. I don't like when people say certain things about me, because that's not who I am.
Right.
And ultimately, with those boundaries, again, boundaries are supposed to allow you to connect with people in meaningful ways that are safe for both of you. They're not just something that, is like you're controlling the other person, because I've heard
Right.
people say that. When I set a boundary of, like, I will not engage with people who are trash talking me behind my back, and I always find out about it. It's pretty funny. When I set that boundary, my boundary is that I'm going to disengage. I'm not controlling what they do. They can do whatever they want to. They can continue talking about me. If they want to talk about my tone of voice right here, right now, have at it. Be my guest. But that's not the point. The point is I can walk away from that. I control myself. I can disengage from that conversation. I can disengage from that person. I can disengage from continuously being judged or told all of these negative things that are really detrimental to one's health.
Right.
Because the other part is that trauma affects you in so many ways, and each and every single person is, you are worthy of human rights, and human rights says that you deserve food, shelter, safety. Hold up. What is safety? Safety, physical safety. You deserve privacy. You deserve the right to live a meaningful life. You deserve the right to choose what religion, or if you even want to be part of a religion. You are worthy of that right. And I just want you to think about what it is that brings you joy and peace and fulfillment in life. And I want you to work towards that, because you are worthy. Even if you might not believe it, I believe it. And I want to thank everybody on this panel for coming on and having this conversation. I really appreciate it. It is an honor to be here. Thank you, everybody, for listening and commenting. And I mean, 20 years ago, I never fathomed that I would ever be having a conversation like this on a video chat online at all, ever. And so, like, sometimes I have to sit here and marvel at where we came from and where we're at now, and how it's like so different now. And it's so beautiful because we get to do this. Our voices matter.
Yeah.
We matter.
Yeah.
And
And
then
can I just say to you, Mary, like, thank you for giving us the opportunity to be here. Like, thank you for platforming our voices, and for letting us speak for ourselves.
Right.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mary.
Absolutely.
You're
Thanks,
making it
Deb.
happen.
Thank you, Mary.
Okay, this is uncomfortable territory. So now we're going to say thank you to our listeners. Thank you to our viewers and our commenters. And thank you, everybody over on Patreon who has really helped fund this podcast with the Misfit Amish. Art is, of course, as always, by BJK. And until next time, like, comment.